Hello my beautiful watchers and welcome back to Lost in Adaptation, the show dedicated to discussing the differences between films and the books they are supposedly based on. This is a slightly unusual episode in as far as its reason for existing is concerned. In case you didn't know, I ran a panel at ConBravo recently called the Lost in Adaptation Dragon Tank Shark's Den thing that was basically a chance for a beautiful watcher to talk me into doing an episode of their choice as soon as I got back from the convention. The winner was Scream Street. Yeah, I'd never heard of it either, but gosh darn it, Emma here really nailed the pitch of her showmanship, so here we are. The only real downside to this is it's a stop-motion animated show, which I have on multiple occasions confessed I have a very strange irrational fear of. However, I have endeavoured to overcome this phobia out of a love for my fans, so let's do this. Scream Street is a 13-issue book series aimed at children and written by British author Tommy Donbavand. I think that's how you pronounce that, but you know me. Surprisingly, all 13 books were published between 2010 and 2011. While they are all quite short, that's still pretty fucking impressive. Donbavand must have gotten really, in the zone writing-wise for a whole year to pull that off. The adaptation was released by the BBC on their child-orientated channel CBBC between 2015 and 2017, running for a total of 52 episodes, each lasting 11 minutes. You might have noticed the telling use of air quotes just then. That's because we have another in-name-only clause on our hands, so the regular format of Lost in Adaptation must be forsaken in favour of describing the two entities separately, and, for the most part, letting the differences speak for themselves. I might still draw attention to some interesting things, because why not? Okay, let's start with the book, shall we? The basic concept of the Scream Street book series is very, very small amounts of supernatural monsters exist in the world, and when they are discovered, they're forcibly relocated by a mysterious organisation called the Government Housing of Unusual Lifeforms, or GHOUL, to what appears to be a pocket dimension consisting of a single town called Scream Street. For the most part, the various monsters of Scream Street live in good-natured, friendly harmony in an environment where they no longer have to hide what they are or fear they might hurt someone. The only real downside to the place for them is that all the properties in their town are owned by an obnoxious, power-mad, petty, inconsiderate arsehole called Sir Otto, a man who harbours genuine hatred for the residents due to an event in his past, and whose attempts to revenge himself on them with the help of his shape-shifting nephew Dixon range from simply mean-spirited to genuinely malevolent and dangerous. The story centres around Luke, a young boy who recently discovered he is a werewolf, forced to transform into an uncontrollable beast when angered. When he comes within inches of ripping a schoolmate to shreds, he gets the attention of ghouls, so he, his parents, and his entire home are packed up and transported to Scream Street. Upon arrival, Luke instantly adapts to life there, befriending a boy named Rhesus Negative, the unexpectedly human son born of two vampires, and Cleo, an impulsive but good-natured 6,000-year-old mummified girl. He also discovers that he can now partially transform into wolf form, granting him super strength and senses while maintaining control over his body. Unfortunately, Luke's parents, despite wanting what's best for their child, just cannot get used to life surrounded by monsters, living in a state of perpetual terror despite their neighbours' attempts to put them at ease. Overcome with guilt that they were banished from their normal lives with him, Luke swears that he will find a way to get them back to the human world. Quickly, actually pretty much instantly discovering that if he can collect relics from the 6 monsters who originally founded Scream Street, he will be granted a wish that he can use to open a gateway to wherever he wants to go. He, Rhesus and Cleo have to solve riddles, overcome challenges, go on adventures, contend with the active hindrance of Sir Otto and occasionally take time to foil a nefarious plan of his, all the standard heroic quest junk. This is the point where I have to admit that I did not read all 13 books in this series in the build-up to this review. The kids seem to average 1 relic a book, so I can only assume that is the overarching plot of the first 6, and a cursory glance at the synopsis of later novels seems to involve them attempting to return the relics to where they belong, which is an interesting twist on the standard MacGuffin collection quest theme. By the way, I am aware that the concept of a young man finding out that he's special, going to a magical place, befriending a boy and a girl, and then going on quests to find certain items does sound a little familiar. I think we are just going to have to make our peace that every popular book series from now on is going to feel a little Harry Pottery. While I will freely admit that my age makes me less than the ideal candidate to judge these books, I believe I have reviewed enough literature out of my demographic to allow me to confidently tell the difference between a good children's novel and a bad children's novel, and these books are actually really good. They do not, as so many others do, much to my chagrin, talk down to their intended audience. Donbavand works on the assumption that the reader doesn't need every single aspect of a situation spelled out for them instantly, that they can remember callbacks without needing constant reminders of them before and after their role in the plot, and it's okay to develop a character in a children's book around more than a single all-defining quirk. Looking at you, Daniel Handler. You also get the impression that there are genuine stakes involved, as you can tell that Luke's parents are getting genuinely traumatized by their time in the town, and as I mentioned, Sir Otto does not mess around in his attacks on the residents, often endangering or straight up trying to end lives in his schemes. In addition, Otto's hatred is revealed to be way more complex than simply an evil character being evil for evil's sake. Apparently, his parents used to run the town, and they were so wrapped up in trying to keep their monster friends happy, they even forgave them for an incident that resulted in Otto's throat being torn out when he was a child. Forced to live with a gaping hole where the front of his neck used to be, his life force is now sustained by a combination of smoking magical cigars and perpetual anger. His tyrannical rule of the townsfolk is the result of his bitterness over his deformity and his misplaced resentment towards his late parents. For a children's book, there's actually quite a few descriptions of surprisingly dark imagery like this. The literally faceless henchmen of Ghoul who chloroform you and zip you up in body bags for transport are an early example. Unfortunately, despite being pleasantly surprised by the quality of these books, I cannot in good faith say that they are the kind of children's novels that adults can enjoy as well, for the singular reason that the story in each one will feel super rushed to a mature reader. This is not a criticism in any other respect. The fast-paced plot is perfectly designed to hold the extremely limited attention span of its intended age demographic. It just does come with the side effect of putting a definite cap on the maximum age it can appeal to. If you have a child that you wish to entertain and or install in them the seeds of interest in the good-natured gothic macabre, I highly recommend these books as something to read to them or encourage them to read when they're old enough. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't bother tracking them down for yourself. Okay, just give me a second. I have to mentally prepare myself for the stop-motion animation. Right, let's talk about the TV show. The first, well, okay, maybe the second thing you'll probably notice about the Scream Street TV show is the absence of any sort of overarching storyline. Each and every installment is 100% a bottle episode. The series begins with Luke already situated in the Scream Street pocket dimension, leaving the setup to be hastily explained in the opening theme song. His parents, specifically his father, seem somewhat exasperated by the supernatural goings-on of the town, but are clearly not getting traumatized to the point where they have a pressing need to leave. In the absence of a multi-story encompassing quest with actual stakes, the kids now partake in what is probably best described as shenanigans, some of which could be described as significantly wacky. The first episode centers around the unforeseen and unfortunate consequences of Luke attempting to use magic to tidy his room so he can dodge his responsibilities and go to a rock concert. The second chronicles the trio of friends getting trapped in a living house that tries to digest them. The third is about a love spell that goes awry and turns half the town into jelly. The fourth involves the flamboyant ghost of a parody of Wolfgang Amadeus possessing Luke to help him pass his music exam, and I think you get the idea. Before you notice all this, you'll probably notice that the animation involved in the Scream Street TV show looks a little cheap. I mean, I suspect they're trying their best, but the BBC is not known for its generosity when it comes to the budget for children's TV shows. As a result, the expressions on many of the characters, especially the ones who don't show up very often, tend to remain somewhat limited, forcing the voice actors to work doubly hard to try to make up for that. Speaking of the voice actors, this show features the amusingly common issue in children's animated TV shows where the voices of the children are obviously being provided by grown-ass adults.
Where are you off to?
I'm just popping out. I'm gonna go meet Regis and Cleo at Aoife's.
Good lord, if this is him before puberty, he's gonna sound like Darth Vader by the time he's 20. Once again, I must confess that I did not have time to take in all 52 episodes of this show for the purposes of this review, but unless something is revealed in later episodes, unlike his book counterpart, Otto appears to just be evil for evil's sake. He also appears to have been toned down somewhat, being selfish and obsessed with money, but not overly hateful of the residents of the town, and his throat appears to be intact. This isn't surprising considering the lighter tone of the TV show, but it's a bit of a shame regardless. There isn't enough child-orientated entertainment with morally complex villains in my opinion, so I'm sad to see this one return to the status quo in the adaptation process. Dixon has been changed from Otto's nephew to his apprentice, and the red hair that was usually the first thing to return when he was shape-shifting back to normal in the books is now green, and will often remain in his other forms as a giveaway that it's him. The perpetual night that Scream Street was shrouded in the books is absent, a physical representation of the lighter tone of the show, and apparently not an issue for the vampire residents for some reason. I will say the show is not in every way inferior to the books. The humour, for example, is a notable improvement, as to my surprise there was usually at least one moment of what I would consider genuine wit in every episode.
Why should I help this? friend?
Because my friend... Oh, you know it's me, right?
Now I look back at it, Cleo, I wish I'd listened to Rhesus. Yes, Luke, then we wouldn't have ended up dead.
Means your and Loella's love spell did work.
Yeah, in a roundabout, messed up, nearly world-destroying sort of way.
Oh, 999, stop! Soon this tune will be a ghost because you are killing it. But seriously, you are terrible.
The book's near constant attempts to be funny range from simply not funny to outright cringy at times, so that was a welcome deviation. So yeah, self-contained stories where lessons about always being oneself, taking responsibility, and not trying to take cheating shortcuts in life are learned in 11 minutes, then instantly forgotten between episodes, slightly inappropriate sounding but otherwise okay voice acting, somewhat iffy stop-motion animation, but a pretty decent script. All in all, really not a bad TV show. I assume kids liked it considering it ran for almost 3 years, and compared to the book it holds up better with an older audience. The Dom's final thoughts. This was a weird experience for me because it is basically the same characters and locations but following completely different storylines and shrouded in a somewhat different tone. For me personally, both versions of Scream Street turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable, albeit in very different ways. As discussed, the books are far superior in storytelling, but the show sports better comedy and will probably hold up better as its audience ages. The bottle episode orientated, goofy nature of the show's storytelling isn't inherently inferior, but if you came straight to it after having just read the books and gotten used to the slightly more serious nature of the plot and the continuous linear storyline, it might grate on you somewhat. But then again, maybe not. I repeat that I am a little out of the intended age range for either version of this story. Perhaps a younger person would simply be pleased to see these characters brought to life on the screen and not give a fuck that they suddenly seem to be meandering around doing pointless shit instead of having focused goals. Either way, adaptation-wise, this isn't really one, but I am glad both versions exist. Thank you for joining me, my beautiful watchers. Hello again, my beautiful watchers. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you a quick reminder that there's a wonderful website called Patreon that's been allowing online producers to actually make a living doing what they do, since apparently YouTube's decided that they shouldn't anymore. Basically, they offer the chance to pledge a certain amount of money per month or per video in exchange for various rewards offered by the creator. There's a variety of stuff you can earn by becoming one of my patrons, including early access to all videos and taking part in that survey you see at the start of every Lost in Adaptation episode. That's actually a very important part of the process, as I use it to gauge how much I'm going to need to explain about the book and the film before I start comparing them. If you decide to become a higher level contributor, your name will be added to the credits that you're seeing right now, and you'll be given the option to join my private chat room so you can regularly talk with me and other patrons. If you're keen enough to join the topmost tier of patronage, you'll earn the most coveted of all the rewards, the chance to pick a future adaptation to be reviewed by yours truly. However, if right now you are thinking, my goodness the Dom, I can't do that. According to the rather unusual laws of my country, I must defeat several alligators in Mortal Kombat before I'm legally allowed to support online content, and I'm afraid my reptilian martial arts are just not what they used to be. Fear not, it would still be a huge help to me if you were to give that like button the old clickaroo, share this episode on social media with perhaps a little recommendation to your friends to check it out, and subscribe if you've not already. It really helps my channel grow and reach new beautiful watchers. I hope you have a most pleasant day, and I will see you in the next episode.